The title of our message this evening is Job's Answer to Bildad'S Third Discourse, Part 3. And we're in the 28th chapter of Job. This chapter is about wisdom. And we also need wisdom for the Oval Office in Washington. When William McKinley took the oath of office as President of the United States, he placed his hand upon these words found in 2 Chronicles chapter 1, verse 10. Give me now wisdom and knowledge, that I may go out and come in before this people. For who can judge this thy people that is so great? Although McKinley had advanced to the highest office in the land, he was aware of his need for divine wisdom. This is true for every believer. All Christians need God-given wisdom if they are to face their duties in a way that honors God. Wisdom is a spiritual insight from God that provides discernment or insight into a life situation, seeing it for what it is, and the proper application of biblical truth to that situation. It's one thing to know truth, but something else entirely to know how it applies to our lives. Knowledge is the understanding of truth, and wisdom is the proper application of the understood truth. Wisdom is seeing ourselves for who we are and in any situation for what it is, and applying God's truth accordingly. Wisdom is essential if we are to take spiritual inventory of our lives. And that's precisely where Job found himself at this point in his unfolding saga. He was a man in dire need of divine wisdom. If he was to face his suffering successfully, he needed wisdom from above, which is more. And what is more, if he was to be rightly instructed by his three friends, they also needed wisdom. This soliloquy in Job chapter 28 is a declaration of what is so desperately needed: heavenly wisdom from God, not worldly wisdom from man. Job continues his discourse with one of the most beautiful poems of creation that you can find anywhere. It may not seem like poetry to us, but it is Hebrew poetry, and it is beautiful. He deals with things that are absolutely wonderful. If we were studying poetry, I would spend a long time here. First, God's wisdom cannot be sought. Verses 1 through 3, surely there is a vein for the silver and a place for gold where they find it. Now that word is F-I-N-E, not F-I-N-D. So where they find it, that's where they refine gold. Iron is taken out of the earth and brass is molten out of the stone. Does anybody know the difference between bronze and brass? Well, there's a reason. What's the difference?
Bronze has some iron in it?
Bronze has tin in it, and brass has zinc in it. So bronze is harder. It has tin, and brass is copper. Both of them have copper base, but bronze is copper and tin, and brass is copper and zinc. He setteth an end to darkness, and searcheth out all perfection, the stones of darkness and the shadow of death. God has put silver and gold and iron and precious stones into the earth, and it's difficult to find these things. I personally don't think that men have found the vastness of the treasures that are really in this old earth on which we live. We may have only found a fraction of it. I think this chapter is saying that very clearly. It also suggests that there are precious stones which have never yet been discovered, which might be more valuable than even a diamond. Now look at verses 4 and 5. The flood breaketh out from the inhabitant, even the waters forgotten of the foot. They are dried up, they are gone away from man. As for the earth, out of it cometh bread, and under it is turned up as it were fire. So not only does the earth turn up precious stones, but it also produces food, bread for us to eat. Verses 6 through 8, the stones of it are the place of sapphires. It hath dust of gold. There is a path which no fowl knoweth, and which the vulture's eye hath not seen. The lion's whelps have not trodden it, nor the fierce lion passed by it. The birds fly over the earth and its mountains. There are veins of minerals down in the earth that the birds fly over and know nothing about, and neither can the vulture see them. There must be precious stones and veins of riches and wealth which are completely unknown and untapped. Verse 9, he putteth forth his hand upon the rock, he overturneth the mountains by the roots. God can cause the earthquake. He can change the topography of the land. He can expose these veins of riches in the earth that he wants to have exposed. Verses 10 and 11. He cutteth out rivers among the rocks, and his eye seeth every precious thing. He bindeth the floods from overflowing, and the thing that is hid bringeth he forth to light. Job has been talking about the minerals and the precious stones in the earth. There are things which are of even more value, wisdom and understanding. Job knows that God has placed the minerals in the earth, but where is the source of that precious commodity? Wisdom. And not only can God's wisdom not be sought, but God's wisdom cannot be bought. And that's in verses 12 through 22, and we're going to start out with verses 12 through 14. But where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Man knoweth not the price thereof, neither is it found in the land of the living. The depth saith, it is not me, it's not in me. And the sea saith, it's not in me. Job is telling his friends that they have not found wisdom. I would like to voice an opinion on the basis of this passage. I don't think that all of this probing of the ocean floor and space and every crevice in the earth is going to tell man anything related to real wisdom and real knowledge concerning the origin of the earth. Man cannot find it here. He will not learn how it came into existence nor who put it into existence. Verse 15, it cannot be for gold, neither shall silver be weighed for the price thereof. We have paid billions of dollars to bring back rocks from the moon. And those are mighty expensive rocks, considering the cost of a round-trip transportation. But they're not telling man what he would like to know. Verses 16 through 18. It cannot be valued with the gold of Ophir, with the precious onyx or the sapphire. The gold and the crystal cannot equal it, and the exchange of it shall not be for jewels or of fine gold. No mention shall be made of coral or of pearls, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. The wisdom that Job hoped his friends would bring to him is a wisdom beyond the understanding of man. His friends didn't have that kind of wisdom. And the reason they didn't have it is God didn't give it to them. Now look at verse 19. The topaz of Ethiopia shall not equal it, neither shall it be valued with pure gold. Even the U.S. Bureau of Standards just cannot evaluate wisdom. Verses 20 through 22. Whence then cometh wisdom? And where is the place of understanding? Seeing it is hid from the eyes of all living, and kept close from fowls of the air. Destruction and death say, we have heard the fame thereof with our ears. We've heard about it, but even death ought to tell us something. It ought to tell us that there is something on the other side. And it ought to tell us that there is something we do not know. Men just step through the door of death, and they're not able to get word back to us. Houdini, the great magician, left a code with his wife before he died so that he could communicate with her after he was gone. Spiritualist after spiritualist came to Mrs. Houdini, claiming to have a message from her husband, and they wanted to perform for her a seance. But she would say, well, give me the code. None of them was able to come up with the code, which means that no one heard from Houdini after he died. We just don't get word back from over there. That should tell us that there's something which we do not know today. And not only can God's wisdom not be sought or bought, God's wisdom comes only from above. Verses 23 through the end of the chapter, and we'll cover verses 23 through 25 right now. God understandeth the way thereof, and he knoweth the place thereof. For he looketh to the ends of the earth, and seeth under the whole heaven, to make the weight for the winds, and he weigheth the waters by measure. The source of wisdom is found in God alone, who understands the way to it. Only God knows where it dwells. It is by divine design that he alone has wisdom. Being all-knowing, he views the ends of the earth. Nothing is hidden from his all-seeing, all-knowing gaze. All wisdom is with God himself. God established the force of the wind at the time of creation, as well as matters dealing with the measuring waters. All this was done with wisdom that God alone possesses. Verse 26. When he made a decree for the rain and a way for the lightning of the thunder. When God made a decree for the rain and a path for the thunderstorm, he consulted wisdom to do so, meaning he consulted himself. Both the rain and the thunderstorm are controlled by God. Now, the last two verses. Then did he see it and declare it. He prepared it, yea, and searched it out. And unto man he saith, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. Job's friends were not able to probe Job's problem at all. We're going to see his secret sin revealed, but it's not anything that his friends suspected. He is suffering from a bad case of perpendicular itis, and that's a very serious disease. It's a case when the little pronoun I becomes so important that all we can think about is I. And we find that Job is filled with this kind of pride. This shows us that even a good man needs to repent. We will find in this chapter of 28 verses that Job uses the personal pronouns I or me 52 times in 28 verses. It's amazing that Job is wrapped up in himself. That's his big problem. We will see how it affected his life. It affects the life of anyone when we all get wrapped up in ourselves. Someone has said when you're wrapped up in yourself, it makes a mighty small package. Now, this chapter does not contain any form of a confession by Job. It is really his boasting. He has I problem. There are many of us who have it too. The perpendicular pronoun is the hub of the wheel of life for all of us. Everyone is a spoke that goes out from a hub, and I is the hub. Us is the hub. We see no brokenness of spirit. There is not that broken and contrite heart no admission of guilt, no confession, no feeling of guilt or failure. Job's friends were not able to help him. They failed to see the real problem. They didn't know Job, they didn't know themselves, and they certainly didn't know God. They believed that God sent trouble to Job only as a punishment, and they thought Job was just holding out. They roughed him up and were miserable comforters to him. Each one used a different approach, and yet they all came to the same conclusion. Job has some secret sin. That's why God's punishing him. We can sum up the methods of his friends. Eliphaz was the voice of experience. He used what would be called today the psychological approach. This is the approach of the power of positive thinking. It adopts a cheerful attitude. Bildad was a traditionalist. He used the philosophical approach. That would be the approach of several of the seminaries today. They use the philosophical approach, but that doesn't help anyone. Zophar was a religious dogmatist. He thought he knew all about God. He sounds like some of us fundamentalists, by the way. All of us would fall into the category of one of these friends. As we've seen, not one of his friends had been able to help him. Wisdom comes from above. A student attending Columbia University believed he'd been assured by the university that he would be taught wisdom. Feeling that the university had failed him in the matter, he filed suit against it for $8,000. The Superior Court dismissed the case. The presiding judge declared these charges were set in a frame of intemperate, if not scurrilous, accusations. Wisdom is not a subject that can be taught, and no rational person would accept such a claim made by any man or any institution. No human institution can teach wisdom. Such God-given insight into life comes only from God and His Word. Wisdom comes from above, not from here on the earth. Thus, people must seek God if they are to find wisdom. When Luke wrote the book of Acts, in the early part of that gospel, or in the early part of Acts, he tells a person he's writing to, he said, now I've examined all the witnesses. Before I'm writing, I just want to write the Gospel of Luke, I'm sorry. He said, I've examined all the witnesses. But he said, I got it, the Greek word, I got it from above. And that's where we get our wisdom. And that's where he got his writing of the Gospel of Luke. He got it from above. It was inspired by God. Only those who fear God will find this treasure that is more valuable than silver and gold.